If you like this video, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos. UFOs Land on Capitol Hill by Robert Stanley from Unicus magazine website. Contents: photographic evidence of UFOs landing on Capitol Hill. Capitol offense, alien incursions of restricted airspace. Book excerpts: Return to Washington, D.C. Return to Tamos, Vita Alienagena. Return to the Saga of Flying Objects. 2002 photographic evidence of UFOs landing on Capitol Hill. July 16, 2002 Blue, sphere-shaped UFO land briefly on the Capitol building roof lower right of the dome, then takes to the air. These images were captured approximately 30 seconds apart. The time codes on the above images are approximations. As I write this article in June of 2005, the official American policy of plausible deniability, distraction, and public dissuasion regarding UFOs is now more than 50 years old. This policy is currently supported by nearly all politicians, Pentagon officials, and members of the media regardless of their political or religious affiliation. The policy began to emerge in 1942, due to the increasing numbers of UFO military encounters during World War II. However, the current policy didn't achieve its mandate until the year 1952, as dramatically growing numbers of UFO sightings worldwide were viewed by a range of responsible American leaders as the beginning of a possible alien invasion. In 1952, during July, many of the world's newspapers reported that dozens of strange, spherical, glowing, unidentified aircraft were sighted by hundreds of eyewitnesses above the nation's capital. These objects had registered on the radar as they flew over Washington, D.C., and F-94 jets were scrambled to intercept, but they were easily outmaneuvered by the UFOs. The UFOs reportedly were loitering in the area for many hours through the night on at least 2 occasions and were able to mysteriously appear and disappear at will. There were very few photographic images taken of those events, but they are impressive. And yet, when those strange glowing unidentified aircraft returned exactly 50 years later in July of 2002, only a few media sources reported a brief, failed UFO intercept that F-16s had experienced. Most Americans had no idea that this was just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, the events that occurred during 2002 were even more enigmatic than those of 1952 because of the incredibly clear, high-resolution nighttime photographs that were taken. Color images captured on high-speed film by a professional photographer show conclusively that during July 2002, on the 4th and the 16th, several UFOs were flying over the restricted airspace of the Capitol building and the Washington Monument. And as incredible as it sounds, they provide evidence that on July 16, UFOs encircled and landed on the Capitol building roof and the surrounding park area late that night. Here's what happened. On July 16, at approximately 12:30 a.m., a professional Washington, D.C. photographer was shooting an album cover for a recording artist using the reflecting pool and Capitol building as a background. Based on the 2 images that were taken and the testimony of the D.C. photographer, there were no other people seen on the Capitol building grounds at that time. However, what is clear from these 2 images is that there were at least 5 UFOs that penetrated restricted airspace in that location. At least 2 of these vehicles actually landed for a brief period. As that was occurring, one of the other UFOs entered the reflection pool and submerged, while yet another UFO hovered nearby over the water, emitting an eerie-looking energy field that reflected light beneath it. All of the photographer's images were captured with a Nikon F5 camera equipped with a very expensive, distortion-free, AF-ED 600mm f2.8 lens mounted on a tripod. The exposure time was 1/15 of a second on high-speed film, ISO 1600. The ISO meter on the camera was set at 1200 to slightly overexpose the film and increase the overall density of the image. After taking the 2 pictures in front of the Capitol building, the DC photographer then moved to a different location on the edge of the Capitol building's lower Senate Park. He estimates that 20 minutes elapsed before taking the next and final shot of the evening. That image exposure time was 3.5 minutes. Hovering in the sky, just above a commercial building, there are several UFOs, some are grouped in a triangular formation. Near the ground, there are 2 UFOs in the distance. However, floating in the air in front of the DC photographer, there are two oval-shaped, semi-transparent spheres of energy that he believes were UFOs equipped with some type of advanced optical stealth device. The amount of alien activity that took place that night was mind-boggling. The large formation of UFOs parked above the building emitted strange energy. The highly complex signature of their energy fields was clearly captured on the film due to the long exposure time and their proximity to the camera. Just before leaving the area, the UFOs generated a wormhole in space. Unfortunately, this incredible image came at a price. The DC photographer's fingers were burned by radiation and took about a year to heal. During one of our conversations, he explained that I was positioned underneath these objects. And according to my images, they warped out or whatever they did and went back to wherever they came from in the time of that exposure. At that point, there is an image that shows a center set of UFO formations in lateral and upward motions. I felt that I was caught in the thrust of something, like I was hit by a mist, but there wasn't any moisture. Soon after that, I noticed I had very fine, pinhole-sized burns in my fingernails and my arms felt like they were charged with some kind of energy. Just 10 days later, on July 26, 2002, Fox News correspondent, Shepard Smith, reported that the nighttime skies over the nation's capital came alive with blue and orange lights streaking across the sky, so say a lot of panicked people who called Toto a radio station. No joke here. American fighter jets in hot pursuit. NORAD confirmed to Fox News that two F-16s did scramble, but found nothing. A mystery in the sky above Andrews Air Force Base, that's the one the president uses. Fox DC correspondent, Brian Wilson, continued the story. It's fair to say, Shepard, that there are a lot more questions than answers at this point, but something strange was going on in the Maryland night sky. Here is what we know. At 1 a.m. the folks at NORAD saw something they couldn't identify in Maryland airspace, not far from the nation's capital, restricted airspace. The track it was taking caused them some concern, so they scrambled two DC Air National Guard jets to check things out. Now, DC Air National Guard confirms that two F-16s from the 113th Wing were vectored to intercept whatever it was that NORAD was worried about. However, when the pilots got where they were supposed to be, they said they didn't see anything when they arrived on the scene. NORAD would not provide details about the exact location, direction, or speed of the object they were tracking. Independently, several folks who live in Waldorf, Maryland, which is not far from Andrews Air Force Base and not far from the nation's capital, called local radio station WTOP to say that about the same time, they witnessed a fast-moving, bright blue light in the sky. They claimed that the light was being chased by military jets. One witness told the radio station that the jets were right on its tail. As the thing would move, a jet was right behind it. An investigation is underway. But National Guard spokesman, Captain Sheldon Smith said, "We don't have any information about funny lights." By the way, this just happens to be the 50th anniversary of a series of still unexplained sightings over the nation's capital, a story that made banner headline news in 1952. Shepard will continue to watch for this. Meanwhile, that same night, a father and son in Arlington, Virginia, had gone outside to get their cat off a ledge outside a second-floor window around 1:15 a.m. They were both looking up at the side of the house wondering how to get their cat down when two circular white lights flew over their house. They estimated the UFOs were about the size of a baseball held at arm's length. The UFOs were visible for about 2 minutes before moving off but soon came back again. This time both UFOs stopped close by, and that's when the father and son realized the spheres were small. Both UFOs stopped for a second, and then one of the objects flew away at a right angle to its previous path of flight. The other object remained motionless for about 5 seconds before continuing pretty much its original direction. These were two separate objects flying in tandem at first, and then separately. They were clearly under intelligent control. 4 months later, on November 11, 2002, the DC photographer captured another amazing nighttime photograph of a small UFO. This object was a metallic sphere about the size of a golf ball that silently defied gravity. It literally floated over the head of a beautiful blonde model before swiftly moving off. 1 year later, in November of 2003, Fox News reported that Air Force fighter jets were once again scrambled and that the White House was briefly evacuated on the 20th after birds or possibly disturbances in the atmosphere tripped radar that keeps watching on restricted airspace around the complex. According to Fox News, Federal Aviation Administration spokesman, William Schumann, said, "It's a false radar target." When the NORAD fighters got to the location of the alleged violation, they found nothing. The North American Aerospace Defense is the command center for the defense of U.S. and Canadian airspace. Schumann explained how flocks of birds or atmospheric disturbances might have caused the false radar reading, which was initially thought to be a plane flying within 5 miles of restricted airspace around the White House. "It's one of those electronic gremlins that pop up, but there was no aircraft there. So, should we just forget what happened in 1952 and again in 2002 and 2003? Those events are behind us now and no one was seriously injured, right? But what if I told you that a swarm of UFOs passed over our nation's capital as recently as Monday, May 2, 2005, at 8:45 p.m. Eastern Time? According to an eyewitness, a fleet of UFOs once again passed through restricted airspace undeterred. Below is the amazing account that was sent to me by a friend of the DC photographer. I spoke with him on the phone 24 hours after the event and he was still in shock by what he had observed. This man, who I will call the graduate student, is highly intelligent and very credible. He is working on his PhD in anthropology at a Catholic university. He wrote, "I was in the bathroom of my apartment on U Street, NWDC, looking out the window when I saw a helicopter with its searchlight on as it cruised at about 400 feet elevation moving west to east over the S Street, NW area. This is a normal thing to see in my hood. I just paid attention because it had the searchlight on, which is generally only used when they are looking for bad guys on the ground. However, the searchlight of the helicopter went directly over what appeared to be a very large swarm of bees. I thought this was very strange, not only to see such a swarm at that altitude but also that these objects must have been a lot larger than bees to see them that distinctly from about 1/8 mile away and approximately 400 feet up. The helicopter continued on its way as if it did not see anything. Nor did it fix its light onto the strange swarm. So I began looking more closely at this swarm, which was cloud-like but seemed to have the distinct shape of a very large triangle. It was the size of a football field and was much larger than any aircraft. The wind was blowing west to east at about 10 miles per hour. The Yahoo.com weather page said it was NW 10 miles per hour that night. Either way, the wind was not blowing westerly, which makes my next point even stranger. The clouds in the sky were either standing still or moving toward the east. This group of objects started to cruise south towards the National Mall. At this point, I yelled for my wife to come to the bathroom. "Get in here now. You have to see this weird thing in the sky." I pointed it out to her and she watched with me as we tracked it moving east to west over the mall, over the Washington Monument, toward the Lincoln Memorial, and off toward the Pentagon area. Now, mind you, this is exactly the route the airplanes use to enter DC airspace to land at Washington National Airport. One problem though, the planes must approach from west to east, the exact opposite of what this thing was doing. And this thing was about 15 times or more the size of a 747 easily. It also emitted what appeared to be a faint light, which could have been city light reflecting off of it, but it did seem to be generating this very faint light almost like it was shimmering or some weird phasing of light, like when you are seeing a heat mirage off of hot asphalt. Then, it simply faded off into the distance and out of our view. Again, it was huge, appeared to have a triangular shape, though the mirage-like shimmering somewhat distorted this, had a possible illumination effect, and was moving against the wind at a good speed. It must have been moving pretty fast since it covered ground from Logan Circle area to the Capitol Building area, across the mall toward the Lincoln Memorial, and then off to the Pentagon area, all within a matter of minutes. Yes, the F-16s can do that even quicker, I know, but this was not moving at 10 miles per hour as the wind would suggest if it were a cloud, nor was it moving in the same direction as the other clouds. Okay, so you tell me what the hell this was. Historically, the official answers to this question have been A. Temperature inversion layers, weather balloons, ball lightning, swamp gas, gremlins, meteors, birds. Stars now compare the May 2nd event to what occurred just 9 days later. The FAA revoked the pilot's license of a Pennsylvania man who flew his two-seater Cessna into Washington, D.C.'s restricted airspace on May 11, 2005, causing a highly emotional evacuation of the White House and Capitol building mid-afternoon. Just how serious was this event? NORAD sent 2 F-16s and a Black Hawk helicopter to intercept one Cessna. The FAA said the flight instructor had his license revoked and must wait at least a year to apply for a new one and start over with flight school lessons. Because the instructor was the only licensed pilot in the aircraft, he was responsible for the restricted airspace violation. According to FAA spokesman Greg Martin, it's an extraordinary action that reflects how seriously we view violations within restricted airspace. The big question regarding this ongoing alien incursion of restricted airspace is at what point does a UFO, or swarm of UFOs, represent a threat to national security? Clearly a two-seater Cessna aircraft is considered a threat to national security. Why not a UFO? Perhaps it is because UFOs have not taken any overt hostile action toward us yet? But by the mid-1950s, after studying the matter for years, the U.S. government concluded that the public's potential to panic due to waves of UFO sightings was the only clear and present danger to national security. And thus the official denial, distraction, and dissuasion regarding this matter began. Do our current leaders in Washington, D.C. know about this issue? Clearly, part of their job is to know what's going on, and most are briefed daily from a variety of sources. One such source is the D.C. photographer who has lived and worked in Washington, D.C. for many years. He is an intelligent, patriotic American who felt it was his duty to report what had happened to the proper authorities. That's why he went to the Capitol building a few days after the evening of July 16 and met with members of the Detective Division of the Capitol Police. He patiently showed them the UFO images he had taken on July 4 and 16 and explained the night's events. After some careful consideration, he was told that no crime took place, therefore the detectives would not make a report. Undeterred, he next sent a copy of his photographs and a detailed report to the office of the president, but there was no reply. He then contacted officials at the Pentagon. Not surprisingly, there has been no official response as yet. He then submitted his work to National Geographic and eventually met with an assistant art director who was very excited about the pictures. The DC photographer did not hear back from him for a month, and when he called National Geographic to inquire about his pictures, he learned that the assistant art director had been fired. When I spoke by telephone with the public relations officer for the Capitol Police about the events that transpired the night of July 16, 2002, I was told, "We can neither confirm nor deny if a report exists on this event." When asked if the Capitol Police are on duty all night, he replied, "Security personnel are stationed around the area at all times and security cameras are on all the time for surveillance of the Capitol building and surrounding grounds." Finally, I wanted to know if any representatives worked in the Capitol late at night after the building is closed to the public. The officer explained that members do conduct business at night and will work as late as required. During the course of my investigation of this incredible case, I have discovered an immense amount of material regarding UFOs and Washington, D.C. As a result, a book entitled Capitol Offense: Alien Incursions of Restricted Airspace, written by myself and the D.C. photographer, will be published later this year. Click images to enlarge saucer-shaped UFO hovering over the reflection pool in front of Capitol building, July 16, 2002. Extreme close-up of UFO on Capitol building, July 2002 to 12:30 a.m. Extreme close-up of UFO over Lower Senate Park. Extreme close-up of UFO over Capitol building, July 2002 to 12:30 a.m. Extreme close-up of UFO landed near Capitol building, July 2002 to 12:30 a.m. Extreme close close-up of the blue sphere over Washington Monument, July 4, 2002. Group of UFOs over Capitol Building's Lower Senate Park, July 2002. 1 a.m. July 2002. 12:30 a.m. 4th of July 2002. UFOs over Washington Monument and Capitol Building. A closer look at the three lights over the Washington Monument.